Education would not make sense. Debating would not make sense unless people were committed, in some sense, to common laws of reasoning as to what controls good and bad conclusions, reliable and unreliable conclusions, and patterns of inference that will lead to the truth. Everyone needs laws of logic in terms of education, debate, argumentation, what have you. And yet the unbelieving worldview cannot make the laws of logic intelligible. Here again, the unbeliever shows that he or she knows God, knows that God is an intelligent, personal, reliable, consistent, faithful being, and that they must be like that. They must think logically and consistently, but they don't want to acknowledge God, so they suppress the truth and unrighteousness and come up with some phony theory to explain the laws of logic. Okay, I said there would be 4 illustrations I gave you this morning. We've talked about moral absolutes. You are able to talk to the unbeliever about the basis of morality. We've talked, secondly, about the uniformity of nature. You are able to talk to the unbeliever about the possibility of any science. We've talked about the possibility of universals and laws. You are able to talk to the unbeliever about concepts and logic, and to say, how does your worldview make any of that even sensible? And then fourthly, and real briefly, let's talk about personal freedom and dignity. Unbelievers have certain assumptions about human nature. And those assumptions about human nature lead them to say that human beings are different from the animal world, even if they believe in evolution. And therefore, our thinking is in a classification different from what other biological organisms are doing. And the treatment of human beings needs to recognize their dignity in a way that we don't with other things. Here's a real obvious illustration of that. Do you see anything in the animal world that is likened to a funeral? Do animals have rituals for burying their dead? No. Now, if the unbeliever says we're nothing more than advanced animals, it would make perfectly good sense to ask, why do we have funerals? Even unbelievers have funerals. In fact, it's some of the grossest display of social hypocrisy in the world you've ever seen on the evening news when some well-known actor or actress dies. And everyone, I mean, it's almost the end of the world. We're going to miss this person. It's so... Well, I know what it is to lose a loved one, and I understand the grief of a funeral. I don't understand this public display and all this hoopla and so forth. If all we are, of course, is the front end of evolutionary change, if we're nothing more but advanced animals, why do we have funerals? Why do we, in some sense, express the dignity of human nature and man in that way? Now, I'll tell you why. Because in our heart of hearts, we know that man is different. That man's made in the image of God, and something very tragic has taken place when a human dies. We don't have funerals when a cockroach dies. We don't, well, some people do. I mean, people have funerals for their dogs. Isn't that something? What are we doing when we have a funeral for a dog, however? I mean, besides making fools out of ourselves, we are personifying the dog, treating the dog like a human being. And so this is not an exception to the rule I've given you, it's the exception that proves the rule. The only reason a person buries their dog and doesn't bury their cockroach is because they think of their dog as more personal, more like them. My dog was a friend to me, the cockroach wasn't, which is to say I treated my dog or thought of my dog like a human being to some extent. Human dignity is something which the unbelieving world cannot explain. The very fact that we have law courts, as bad as they work sometimes, nevertheless, the very fact that we have law courts shows that we believe, in some extent, in human dignity. We believe that a person needs to be convicted of something before you can fine him, imprison him, or take away his life. But again, if this is a dog-eat-dog world, if there is no God, then why do we afford dignity any more to human beings, trying them, than, say, before we slaughter cattle and then eat them in our steak dinners? The unbelieving world can talk, and you're going to hear more of this as you go to college in your generation. The unbelieving world wants to talk about all living things being equal. All life must be respected. And if that's the case, then you need to learn to press to absurdity the worldview that says that kind of thing. If all living things have equal dignity, it will not be enough to become a vegetarian. You ever stop to think about how absurd it is when you hear people say it's cruelty to animals to eat them? Hey, I'm going to start a carrot liberation organization. That's cruelty to carrots to eat them too. Oh, in fact, if you want to push hard enough, it's cruelty for you to be breathing, because even though you're not conscious of it, you're killing microbes right now as you breathe. Yeah, so stop breathing. Live up to your worldview. Die. Respect all living things by dying. So there's the internal contradiction, the absurdity of the unbeliever's worldview. What I'm getting at here is that a naturalistic, non-Christian worldview cannot account for the personal freedom of our thinking and the personal dignity that we afford in treating one another. Let me talk about freedom in our thinking. If naturalism is true, that is, that all that exists is the natural order and there isn't anything that goes beyond man's experience in time, if naturalism is true, then the naturalist has no reason to believe his naturalism. You write that down and I'll explain why it's true. If naturalism is true, the naturalist has no reason to believe it. Has no reason to believe it. Because you see, naturalism says all of our thinking is just electrical chemical responses. All of our thinking is subject to the laws of chemistry and physics, which is to say all of our thinking is determined by the factors in the physical world or in the physical brain in the environment around us. All of our thinking is, in principle, predictable then, because it's just following the laws of nature. Usually, more sophisticatedly put, the laws of physics and biology and chemistry and so forth. But the point is, human thinking is just the species of the physical world and its operation. Human thinking is just, it's on the same order, but not the same level of sophistication as weeds growing. And so if naturalism is true, then the person who's propounding it is propounding it why? Because his or her brain has required them by the laws of physics and chemistry and biology to say this sort of thing. It's not as though they have the freedom and self-awareness to think about different theories, evaluate evidence, and make a choice as to which is right or wrong. They just have to say whatever they have to say. And that's why the irony is that a naturalist would promote naturalism and try to tell people it's true. You should believe that and not supernaturalism. The answer is, if naturalism is true, so that your brain is just working on the laws of physics, then you have no reason to believe naturalism is true. It's just the laws of physics requiring you to say that. Which is just to say, if naturalism is true, there's no reason to say that naturalism is true. You're just forced to say that, just like I'm forced by the laws of physics to say the opposite. Unbelievers cannot even account for why we argue with each other then, can they? On their assumptions, there's no argument because there's no freedom to choose the truth over against error. There's just the laws of physics governing my brain to say and do whatever it does. All right, there's been a lot of material here, but I wanted to make sure that I didn't leave before you had some idea of how you can engage in a worldview critique of the unbeliever. You do not have to have read everything in philosophy, but I would recommend that you do some study in philosophy.